Well, good morning, TGIF. So the first question I have to ask you is this. Do you remember the first time that you experienced death? Perhaps that first time that you felt that awful feeling of loss. Maybe the first time in your life that you experienced death, you were too young. Sometimes when we're really young, someone close to us dies and we don't understand what happened. But that's really what happened to me. My grandfather died when I was 2, and I don't remember that. I was way too young to understand. One day he was there, and the next day he was not, and I didn't even know that he was not. But I'm pleased to be here this morning to follow up my talk from a few weeks ago. But what I will say is there is a bit of overlap. There has to be. It's important. So if you're here before and you notice the overlap, great. But it is important. So I'm focusing on the death of a parent, but what I talk about is actually going to be very relevant for the death of anyone, whether they are suffering from something like dementia or a terminal illness of some kind, or just from old age. It will be very relevant. Now, word death creates this feeling inside of us, this tension, this stress. And if you just look inside yourself and see, how do you respond to this word, death? We don't like talking about it, do we? We never feel really comfortable with it. In the Victorian era, they didn't like to talk about sexuality, and so they used nuanced euphemisms. In the Victorian era, they were obsessed with death. In our era, we're quite happy to talk about sexuality. We embrace, our society seems to embrace explicit conversation, but we don't like talking about death, and we will use those nuanced euphemisms to talk about death. We try and sanitize our conversation. Makes it feel bad. I have a look at the title of my talk this morning, The Journey Home. That too is a euphemism, isn't it? You see death as being so final, and it is final. It is final. It's very final, practically speaking. You only have to have someone close to you die to understand that awful finality of it. And yet, for those of us who believe, we understand that death is simply a breath here and a breath with him. When I spoke about my grandfather and being 2 years old when he passed away, my maternal grandmother died when I was 12. I do remember that. That was incredibly shocking for me. I was completely unprepared for the emotion and awfulness of it. That incredible feeling of loss. That feeling that you can't understand unless you've experienced it. I was 27 years old when my dad died. He died in hospital, and I had been on a church camp. Got back on the Sunday after the church camp and went out to dinner with some friends, thinking as soon as we had finished the dinner, I'd go and visit him in hospital. And as we finished the dinner, I got the call to say that he had just passed away. Can you imagine how it felt to have had the time to go and spend with my dad in hospital, and it was just too late. It was just too late. But for me, by far the worst experience of death in my life was when my mom died in 2017. She wasn't particularly sick. She didn't have any illnesses. And she was a teacher. She retired from teaching at age 78 and was worried that she would have nothing to do when she retired. And a couple of months after her retirement, I remember her telling me that she wished she stayed teaching because she had more free time. But she did decline. More trips to the doctors and more trips to the hospital and more often. And I never considered that she would one day die. I mean, of course, cognitively, I knew that that would have to happen, but I never really thought about it. It never seemed real. I could never imagine a world without her in it. And one day she had to go back to hospital. The doctors told me that I should prepare myself and that she was not likely to come home. And that was without doubt, I can say, the most awful day of my life. That I remember that feeling of feeling so lost on that day of getting that news. And I remember how relieved I was the next day when she came home, recovered. My sister and I had 4 amazing months with her. We ate with her, we talked, we went out, we laughed together. But after 4 months, she was back in hospital, and this time she didn't recover. And honestly, it's still hard to talk about. If you have experienced the death of a parent, I'm sure that you can relate to some of what I'm saying. Maybe not even a parent, a sibling, a child, a spouse. But it's with a parent, it seems so amazing, doesn't it? You can have your entire life sorted out. You can be an adult, you can have your own family. Perhaps you're even a parent yourself. And yet this thought of a parent dying fills you with insecurity, with dread. You can be financially secure, no longer reliant on your parents to care for you, but yet your parents are still this source of security for you, of emotional security for you. It's very hard to imagine a world without them. And yet, death is a reality that we all have to face. Your parents will die. You will die. Your spouses will die, sometimes before you. And the truth is that you will die, and we also have to face the reality of our own death. So instead of hiding from it, we can engage with it. Now, if you consider your parents, I know some of us did not have wonderful parents. Some of us did have wonderful parents, but some of us had parents that were more complicated, and I acknowledge that. But your parents have been with you from the very moment that you were born. They have probably been the closest human to you in your life. And certainly been with you the longest. Who in your life has possibly been with you longer than your parents? No one. Since your earliest memories, they've been your primary source of security. If you are honest, if your parents are still alive, they probably still are your primary source of security. Oh, it's nice. It's nice to say that God is our primary source of security. And yes, that is indeed true. And it sounds so right to say that your spouse is your source of security. And these days, it's very politically correct to say that I myself am my own security, my own source of security. But even if you are 50 years old and your mother tells you to put on a jersey because it's cold outside, what are you going to do? You're going to put on the jersey, right? When you want to change jobs, when you want an opinion on a new item of clothing, when you want to tell someone about a new restaurant that you've discovered, who do you talk to for their opinion? And maybe they give their opinion even when you don't ask. But that opinion matters to you. Am I right? That opinion matters to you. Who do you go to ask who's who in the family photographs? Who do you go to ask about family history? At some point, you will become the senior generation in the family. But that thought is very uncomfortable, isn't it? This change is inevitable. Death and shifting of roles is inevitable. It's not comfortable, and it is hard, but we can prepare for it. And a part of that is allowing ourselves to feel that discomfort, acknowledging it. It's necessary as we consider the future. We need to consider the future with open eyes and with open hearts. Your family life cycle is changing. You are in some part of that family lifestyle. And here today, you are either a parent or a child, and some of you are both. What usually happens in a family is that the roles of the parents and the children swap around. They change. If you go to the park as a child, your mom, your dad goes with you. Your mom and your dad can point out dangers in the park to you. Be careful of that hole. Be careful of that log. Watch out for that beehive. Because your parents can see things that you can't. As you grow up, the world changes. I once conducted a memorial service for a lady who was 105 years old. Born in 1911, she saw the First World War as a child. She came of age in the roaring 20s, endured the Great Depression, witnessed the Second World War, got married and had 5 children, all before the age of 30. Just consider how much change this one lady had seen in her life. The Wright brothers' first airplane was just 7 years before she was born for the first air flight. In her life, she'd seen early flights to the moon landing and to the space shuttle. In her life, she'd seen early telephone to email. What changes in this world have your parents seen? Have they experienced? How many changes have you already seen? As you get older, you start to become more unsteady on your feet. Your eyesight worsens. Your hearing worsens. Your health declines. You change. The world changes. Last time we spoke a bit about cognition and how cognition can decline. Your executive functioning starts to be affected. Now, this can sound very scary, but it's also supposed to be scary because this is life. This is what happens. Just consider when you were in your 20s. How easy was it to sit down on the ground and stand up again? How easy is it to stand up off the ground today? How hard is it even to sit down on the ground today? I see some people are laughing. Yeah, don't worry, I'm there too. As you age, you become more insecure. You become less confident. And just like your parents could see things that you couldn't when you were a child, now as an adult, you can see things that they can't. The roles of a parent and child reverse. This can be very uncomfortable. This could also be very unhealthy if it is done wrong or mishandled. It was made into a bigger deal than it is. But if it's done right, it can be a blessing for both parent and child. This happens when it's done naturally, the normal flow of things. There is respect, understanding, and acceptance from both sides. No big family meeting has to happen. Children just start naturally taking over the responsibilities and helping their parents in the spaces in which they struggle. Parents let this happen without trying to be in control. Parents start to ask for help when they need it, when they don't understand something. So if you're that child in that family, be interested in your parents' lives. Be interested when they need help. Notice when they need help. Now, if you were here for my last talk, you'll remember that slide. Remember that one? The stages of late adulthood. Someone in the stage of late adulthood will look back on their life and be concerned about their contribution that they have made. Have they been productive? Have they been good? Have they done well? And to use a term from the Bible, have they run their race well? If they feel they haven't, then they can descend into despair. how can you help your parent to understand and accept their life? I hope you're starting to see the key here. It's conversation, communication, community. We're designed to live in community and not by ourselves. In my work with seniors, I've noticed a definite focus on the future, a desire to talk about death. How will it happen? What will it feel like? And can they please speak about their funeral? I remember when my mom died. We found her in her Bible instructions for her memorial, outlined which pastor should be taking it, who should be doing the eulogies, what song should be sung, to what tune. And what I do remember from those instructions is the last line at the bottom, underlined 3 times and with 3 big exclamation marks. Make sure there's a nice tea. It sounds kind of cute and very nice, but let me tell you, what a difference it made to my sister and I. We didn't have to think about it. We could just do what she wanted. I never wanted to talk about death with my mom. Looking back, I can see that she wanted to talk about it. Take time. Take time to have these conversations with your parents. It will be hard. Will be hard. We never want to think of our parents' death. So what do when they want to talk about it? We say something like, oh no, why must we talk about that now? That isn't going to happen for a long time. You ever said that? Something like that, or heard that? We forget that this conversation is very important to our parents. In fact, if you are the parent, speak to your children. They're not going to want to speak with you about your death. That will make them feel incredibly insecure, fearful, but explain to them how important it is to you. When you're talking with your loved one, speak about important questions. Do they want a funeral or a memorial service? There's a technical difference. A funeral is when the casket is present. Memorial service is no casket. Do they want to be cremated or buried? If they want to be buried, where? And then you need to start putting the admin into place for that. If they want to be cremated, what do they want done with their ashes? Do they want them interred or scattered? Where? If they want them taken to another country, there is a lot of admin and a lot of formalities involved in that. You can't just put them in your suitcase. You can't just scatter ashes anywhere. There are laws. In South Africa, it's illegal to scatter ashes at national parks. You can't scatter ashes in the Kruger Park or in Table Mountain or in the Drakensberg. I shouldn't say can't. You're not allowed to.
Actually, see, you can. It's just there's rules around
There's
it.
rules,
But
yes.
I emailed them and they didn't respond.
Right.
So we went to pay for it anyway.
You're not allowed to, Yancy. You're not allowed to.
So many questions.
Oh, ask your parents, what songs do they want sung at their service? Do they have a particular preference for a particular church or a pastor? Don't assume that the church they're in now is the one that they want to have service. Is there a family member who they do not want to give a eulogy? If you do scatter the ashes in, say, a memorial garden, can you put up a plaque? What will that plaque say? My mom's plaque says always the teacher on it, because that was just her. But these are things that need to be thought about. We put always a teacher on my mom's blog because that's what she told us to put there. Get that conversation. That one we get. Besides conversations about a funeral or memorial, there are other conversations to have. If a parent is a believer, then they will want to reflect on their faith. Take time to pray with them. Read scripture with them. Remind them often that God loves them. They may want to find the words to hymns that have been important to them through their lives. Help them with that. They may want to reminisce about their life. Listen to them, encourage them, engage with them. Take photos of them. Take videos of them. Record their voice. They are going to hate that. But do it. Do it surreptitiously. Trust me, those photos, those videos, those recordings of their voice will mean so much to you after they die. If you are the parent, don't fight this. You may not feel that you look your best. You may be a bit embarrassed. Understand that this will be important for your children. So let them do that. Now, some of the other questions are more legal. Does your loved one have a will? If not, encourage them to write one. Do they have a preference for medical treatment? Speak about a living will. But know the complexities of a living will in South Africa. What we call a living will is technically called an advance directive, and it is not protected by South African law. I need to point out here that I am not, of course, a lawyer, so make sure that you speak to a family lawyer. But from my work, I know that a living will in South Africa is simply an expressing of a preference. The doctor that treats your loved one is not obligated to follow it. Therefore, make sure you have a good relationship with that doctor and the doctors who are treating your loved ones. Make sure that they know and respect your loved one's wishes. Remember my last talk, how I defined a good doctor? There were 3 points. I said a good doctor is one who is competent, who is caring, and who is communicative. Make sure you have a good doctor, one that you can communicate with, one that will respect wishes. This is now important. When your loved one dies, when you are in the depths of your pain, you have to do admin. The admin is unfeeling towards your grief. So often the voice on the other side of the phone is uncaring, just doing a job, not interested in your hurt. It really helps to have all the admin together, to have all the admin in one place. And you can do this by having a life file. That's just a copy of the first page of a life file. A life file is an index for a Lever Arch file that contains all the admin that you're going to need. And I know that the idea of a Lever Arch file sounds obsolete, but trust me, it's the easiest way to keep everything together. It's very detailed. Can you read some of that? No. I'll read a few. My funeral wishes, last will and testament, identity document and or passport, marriage certificate if married, antenuptial contract, in or out of community or property, copy of divorce order and settlement agreement of divorce, 2 certified copies of the first page of identity document and or birth certificate of each heir, 2 certified copies of the marriage certificate of each heir if married. This is quite detailed. This is what you're going to need. In fact, this might be very useful in your own family. God willing, you're not going to be dying anytime soon, but if you do, this will help your spouse. This will help your children if all your admin is together. Rowan and I have been speaking for ages about getting our life files sorted out. We haven't done it yet because, life. But if something were to happen to one of us, what a difference having a life file would make for the other one. If you'd like a copy of this live file, please email me and I'll be very happy to send it to you. Another very important point is to choose a funeral home. They are not all equal. This is important to know, and it's important for you to do now, not when you need it. When your mom or dad, your spouse dies, your emotions are going to be unimaginably complicated. You're not going to be able to think. If you were at a hospital, say, for example, in an ICU, you're not going to have time to process. You're not going to have time to grieve. The nurse will be right there next to you within 5 minutes with a list of 30 different funeral homes. You have to choose one. Which one do you choose? Choose one now. Don't listen to advertising. Ask friends and family for personal opinions, for personal recommendations. Please, this really makes a difference. There's actually only one funeral home that I would use, and I won't name them now, but I'm happy to refer them privately. A friend of ours had her father died last year. She used another funeral home, and she had a very good experience with that one. They're not all equal. Ask for personal recommendations. So we spend so much time talking about how to have a better quality of life. And even when we talk with our parents, what do they need? How can they have a better quality of life in their old age? But let me tell you that considering quality of death is as important as considering quality of life. What is a good quality of death? Well, we can think that it is dying without pain and dying in comfort. And yes, that is true, but maybe there's more. Last year, my mother-in-law, Shona, died. She was an amazing woman, and I was blessed to have her in my life. We had to take her to hospital on a number of occasions. We saw no improvement in her condition every time we took her to hospital. So when she came out, she would either be in the same place she was when she went in, or she'd come out worse. We had to make the hard decision that we were not going to take her to hospital anymore, unless it was absolutely essential. On one occasion, she was in the ICU in Millpark Hospital, which was underground. How awful would it be to die in a place that is so clinical and underground? You can't even see the sky. We wanted her to die in her own bed, surrounded by people that knew her, that loved her, that cared for her. As I said earlier, your mom and dad have been the closest people to you in your life. What is the best way that you can honor them in this time of their life? The best way that you can honor them is to help them to die well. What does dying well mean to them? And that's an important consideration. How they engage with nutrition, for example. This is a good thing to consider. We have to eat right? We've got to have the right food, follow the right diet. Let me tell you that in that stage of a person's life, it's not important. If all they want to eat is ice cream, let them eat ice cream. Calories are more important to them. What if they stop eating? What if they stop drinking? My personal view is that feeding tubes are abusive in this stage of life. Feeding tubes have a role to play. There was a a 12-year-old boy that belonged to that was the son of the son of a nurse at one of the homes that I visit, and he was knocked over by a taxi. He was on a feeding tube. That was necessary. Today he's okay. When you're in the time of life when you are dying, feeding tube is not appropriate. There's two types of feeding tubes: the one that goes through your nose, the nasal one, and the one which they call a peg, which goes straight into your stomach. It's even worse. It's even worse. The person has dementia, because what do they try and do? Pull it out. I did a funeral last year near this family where the father was pretty much forced to undergo a heart operation, to have a stent put in his heart. He was 96 years old. That is abusive. I'm sorry. It is. Watch out for the moment when your parents stop eating and drinking. It's a problem if the person is not drinking because dehydration is awful. But watch when they simply stop eating and drinking. Stopping eating and drinking doesn't cause death. The process of dying causes the person to stop eating and drinking. When they're in the stage of life, when they stop eating and drinking, and the nurses or you or whoever wants to force feed them or force the water in, that's abusive. Please don't do that. Quality of death is making sure the person is comfortable, warm enough, cool enough, not in pain as much as possible, attended to, feeling loved, feeling cared for, feeling that they're not a burden. As you consider the death of your mom or your dad, you will experience something called anticipatory grief during this space. Anticipatory grief is just like regular grief, but with added fear, anxiety, and stress. Fear, anxiety, and stress together will impact your cognition. Sometimes you'll think that you're going crazy. I remember one day taking my mom to see a doctor who was in a shopping mall, and having to take the parking ticket and putting it in the machine to pay for the parking, and I couldn't remember where to put the money in. This is something I've done hundreds of times. That day I just could not process. Where do you put the money into this machine? I thought that maybe I was getting dementia, but that's what it affects. You remember a couple of weeks ago when I spoke about the three channels through which we engage with the world? We engage with the world through our cognition, our emotion, and our history, life history, and experience. And if you imagine these as channels, all of these channels are at the same level, you engage with the world in a healthy way. And what happens when you're grieving? Your cognition is there, but your emotion goes up. So you stop engaging with the world at a cognitive level and start making decisions and engaging with the world at an emotional level. What could go wrong? There's an aspect of anticipatory grief that we don't think about, and that is that the person themselves is also going through anticipatory grief over their own death. Be available to talk. Hold hands. Don't force the conversation. Some people ask me if they should give the person dying permission to go. My answer is always the same. No. No. Unless you're absolutely sure that you know the person will receive it well. Because the person who is dying is far more likely to feel discarded, that they are not wanted anymore, that they are being tossed out. How awful to feel that way. Sometimes we read some really terrible advice on the internet, and this was one of them. Give the person permission to leave. No, don't do that. when we talk about anticipatory grief, we also have to consider our own anticipatory grief for our own life. One day we will die. It is healthy to consider your own death. It is healthy to consider the question, what is a good life? And have I lived a good life? Are you engaging with your death? Be it tomorrow, or maybe 40 years in the future? How are you engaging with it? I'm sure you've heard of Alfred Nobel. He was the inventor of dynamite, right? He woke up one morning and he found that in the newspapers they had his obituary. His brother had died, and the newspapers have got the wrong obituary in the newspaper. And he read what his own obituary said, how the world thought of him, how people thought of him. And he was only remembered for the invention of dynamite, and not at all for the other things that mattered to him. So what did he do? He changed the direction of his life. He initiated a series of awards for different areas of excellence. These have become known as the Nobel Prizes. Rid of the Nobel Peace Prize, that was the most important for him. The Nobel Prizes came to exist because of the wrong obituary in the newspaper. You have an opportunity to change direction in your life if you are to consider it. When your loved one dies, you will be overwhelmed by a sense of loss. And this grief is awful. People ask me, how long does it take? That's not a relevant question. You are unique. You will experience grief in a unique way. We live in the age of information. You can get onto the internet and you can Google the grief process and stages of grief, but don't do that because it's not a process and there's no stages. They're just a jumble of words. If you go and focus on the stages and the process of it, you get confused. But I'm here now, but I'm supposed to be here now. What's going wrong? You will experience grief how you experience grief. How do you do that well? The first thing I will say about experiencing grief well is this: allow yourself to feel the pain. You don't like that pain. You want to push that pain down. Don't do that. Allow yourself to feel the pain. If you don't, that pain is going to come out elsewhere. It'll come out in your relationships, probably your closest relationships. It'll come out through your immunity. You'll find yourself getting sick easier. Some people will take sleeping pills and other medication. My advice is don't take any medication that you weren't taking before. Gets in the way, stops you feeling. Grief is different for everyone. You will grieve differently to someone else in your family, over the same person at the same time. You will grieve differently for different people in your lives. My grief was very different between grief for my dad and grief for my mom. When my mom died, I lost my appetite completely. My sister she ate everything that she laid her eyes on. I wanted to hold on to everything, and my sister wanted to get rid of me. We were both hurting, same place, same time, same person, but completely different. So if there is a death in your family, and you see other family members that you think, wait, they're not grieving, they're grieving, they're just grieving differently. So remember that. One thing that we're all surprised about when it comes to grief is anger. And it comes up. The source of most anger that we experience is insecurity. Grief makes you feel incredibly insecure. People often talk about feeling like a little boat on the ocean, tossed around feel angry. You can be angry at the person who died. You can be angry at God. You can be angry at the doctors or nurses. You can be angry at the lady at the machine in Pick and Pay as you take your groceries, you pay for your groceries. You can be angry on the road more than usual. But sometimes when you're grieving, it's good to ask yourself, why am I angry? Am I angry because it's deserved, and am I angry because of my grief? If James came and stole your cell phone, maybe that's a reason to be angry. If James came and said, how are you? Maybe that's not a reason to be angry. And sometimes James is going to say, how are you? And that is an awful, awful question to ask someone who's grieving, because the answer to how are you is, well, how do you think I am? How am I supposed to be? And when you're grieving and somebody asks you, how are you? Well, they say something silly. They're not trying to be malicious. They're not trying to be malevolent. They just don't know what to say. So you should let that go. By the way, if you are talking to someone who is grieving, don't say, how are you? It's actually really good to say, how are you coping today? It's the same question, but it's very different. By saying, how are you coping today? You're saying, I acknowledge your pain. I know that you're hurting. Slight shift in words, but big difference in meaning. So the reason I put this on the screen, this is an excellent resource for you. It's called Journey with Grief, and it's written by a pastor by the name of Lee Robinson. And I think these books go for about 60 Rand. If you would want some of them, I think we can get hold of them. The winners got access to them. But great resources if you are grieving. The thing to know is death is inevitable. You can't escape it. You have to face it head on. You can't be an ostrich and just pretend it doesn't exist. You can't do that. It will happen. It will happen to those that we love, and it will happen to ourselves. How best can we engage with it? Any questions?
It's fine. It's more of a comment. I think I'm kind of doing similar work in the space of being a death doula. And my experience is with the hospitals and doctors, it's about profit making. They will max the medical aid as much as they can. And families are left in such trauma. And so I find I'm holding that space for the family to make decisions. And I'm currently journeying with a lady that's 94 and that feeding tube. And so luckily the family decided no, but they will still keep her now for another week. And yet she is in the process of dying, the active stages of dying. So they had a family meeting yesterday and they've decided they will keep her. But I said to the family, if she starts slipping into that active stage of dying, then get her home, because that's been their wish for the last 4 weeks. So in South Africa, it's a tough one.
I can even add to that, because when my mom died, my sister was the executor of the estate. And when she was trying to wind up the estate and get all the doctor's bills paid, the medical aid didn't pay for certain of the doctor's bills. When my sister asked them, and my sister can be a fighter, she really can. Why aren't you paying my mom's doctor's bills? And the lady at the medical aid told her quite bluntly, well, we don't know these doctors. These doctors never actually worked on your mom. It was fraudulent.
Yeah.
Do you think that when you are in your most vulnerable emotional space, when you're in this hurt, this grief, that the rest of the world will respect you? No, they won't. They will try and con you. And you need to be, I keep talking about these, your emotion versus your cognition. You can't think because you're in this emotional space. But at some point you have to force this, because you can't, you have to think through, especially the financial things around that.
Just one more comment. The expression of their wishes when somebody dies. Sometimes that's unrealistic. And so I've heard this term from a colleague priest of mine, and she said that funerals are for the living and not for the dead. And it's been so true because I've actually experienced that, where there's now the conflict. Mom said, I want to be cremated, or dad said, I want to be buried, and other way around. And so at the end, then those wishes were not practical for the living. And so then just to hold space and say, look, what is practical for you as the living? And just to navigate around that. So it's really hard, but it's
Sometimes financially possible.
exactly, and that was where we've come to and say, all right, that's the best option, and it's okay. I'm sure your parent will be okay with the plans that have changed, but it's always and families don't know that they can actually do that. And I say, yes, you
They
can.
don't feel the freedom.
Exactly, and I say, yes, you can.
Oh, you had a question.
Yeah, just a comment, because strange enough in our family, we're very open about all of this stuff. So, I mean, we've always spoken kind of what's going to happen at the end. And with my dad's death, the problem was we could not fulfill his wishes. His one thing was, I do not want to die in ICU. I want to be at home. And we could not get him out of ICU. I mean, he went in with a colon obstruction, had surgery, and then they got an infection. And because he had lung issues, he ended up on a ventilator. So exactly that scenario that he did not want. And because there was always this possibility of he could still get out, they would not allow us. And he wanted us to switch him off. And we just couldn't do anything. The doctors wouldn't let us. And for me, that was very traumatic. And I could see the trauma in his eyes, and we couldn't talk and we couldn't assist. I mean, 5 weeks of just not being able to communicate. And it happened quite suddenly. So it wasn't sort of, and for me, that is the bad, the thing is like also coming back to the hospitals. It's like, how honest are they? Because they keep telling you he can still make it, he can still, and then I asked, but what is his quality of life if he makes it? Yeah, he's going to be in a wheelchair. He's going to be, I'm like, he doesn't want this.
There's actually a.
And we just couldn't get the doctors to sort of in any sense say, you know what, take him back home, because they say, look, you can do anything at home except the ventilator.
Actually, what you can do now, there's actually a company that will create literally a hospital room inside your house.
Yeah.
Ro, what is it called? Hospital at home. Yeah.
And I think there's more companies that do it now.
Yeah.
But I looked into that for Mum when we decided that hospitals were actually just causing her to deteriorate. But they only do limited things. So I think they wouldn't do a ventilator.
We looked into it as well, and it was the ventilator which was the issue. And they said that we can't release him if he can't breathe on his own.
The other aspect of the doctor regarding the doctors, besides being the financial motivation, is the doctors also a bigger part.
Legal.
Well, there's a legal side to it, but there's also the feeling that I'm the doctor, I've got to do something. And there's a pressure, I've got to do something, I've got to care. And sometimes that pressure to do something is not appropriate. Vera, I'm coming to you. Yes. That's good.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I wanted to ask how important my dad was killed, and I knew what some of his wishes were, and they weren't they weren't outlandish or anything. I could have fulfilled some of them. He wanted his ashes strewn in some place, and some of my family didn't. They wanted to follow their own head, and it upset me no end that there was this disregard for what I knew my dad wanted. I knew this, right? And it was simple to do, right? So what do? Later on, I just stepped back and I said, well, do whatever you want, you know? So to a degree, I agree, it's for the living, but also where do you draw the line when I know for a fact what my dad wanted, and it was just disregarded, right? So to me, it's kind of like the whole issue of honor your mother and father, right? Yeah. Honor their wishes.
I think there's two sides to that. The first is the key of sorting it out is very easy to say, and that's communication and talking with family. And yes, and writing it down is very important, yes. But the other side of that is when you're in the space, when the whole family's in the space of high emotion, you can't listen to each other. You can't hear each other. You can have one sibling will believe one thing, another sibling will believe another, and both believe they're absolutely right. How do you really? It is best to have it in writing, but not even that is complete answer. I have some pages at home from different folk that I've engaged with their whole funeral planned out, with the choices down. I've got them there. But you know, down to what songs they want sung, but not all the families want to hear that. So Vera, you were next.
I've heard about the fact that some medical aids have palliative care. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, I don't know much about that at all. I'm sorry.
Only if it's cancer. So not for aging. And this is what we've experienced now. So they've moved her into a rehab facility. And they will now provide just the oxygen for her to go home. And then the family must choose a nurse, and it's just a very brief period. But so we need to ask our rights, because they do provide some of it.
So there was a lady in our congregation whose husband had cancer, and he was on a particular plan, and they could get a palliative nurse to come in and care for him at home. And she came in, I think, every 2 or 3 days to administer morphine and to care for him. So I know that does exist. Trish.
My mother left a file of notes of her funeral, and it had to be at St. George's and on a Saturday because the choir could sing, blah, blah, blah. Well, COVID was alive and well. She did not die of COVID, she died in COVID. Not one of her wishes on those 3 pages could I see. So if I were to write out that form that you have there, I would write my wishes, but I would also say at the bottom, you choose. Yeah.
Yeah. If I look at funerals, they are a very important form of closure, and it's important for us as believers to be able to say goodbye. But even for people that are not believers, even for atheists, I've done quite a few atheist funerals, and even in the funeral itself, there is witness of God, and I think when it comes to somebody's death, there is witness, there is a pointing to God. And even for those that don't believe, there's an acknowledgement really often of that. Any other comments?
So I suppose on that, so if in terms of belief allegiance, you're in a different space from your parents, what does the service look like then? Does it lean your way or their way, or are you going to try and integrate?
Well, that's a good question. I think that first of all, what are the parents' wishes? And I think that's probably most important in that space. If you are atheist, but your mom who has just passed away is a firm believer, and have it in church, because that would be more appropriate for her, even if you don't believe.
Yeah, I can comment on that. In my case, I'm the believer in the family, and the rest of the family is less. So, when my dad passed away, we had a bit of a debate on whether to do it in the church or not. And in the end, they decided no, they want to do it at home. For me, the church was more the technical side. Everything was there. It was also sort of in COVID. We had to do Zoom meetings and everything, but we ended up putting up a big tent in the garden, and but then I insisted, so it became a huge celebration. I think we went through 3 cases of bubbly, because that's, I know what he would have wanted. There was even some dancing at the end. So, but at the same time, I told my family I want my pastor there, and she did speak, and they knew her at least, and also yeah, so there was a little bit of that, mainly for those who needed it. And also she was there at the end when he passed away as well. And we discussed it sort of before he couldn't speak anymore, and he was kind of okay with it. So but it is tricky to sort of find the balance, but it's also
Yeah.
for the people who are left behind, and if they need that spiritual support as well.
But also it's beautiful to have a funeral or a memorial service at home
Yeah.
or outside under a tree. I've done
Yeah.
both of those. And for me, the most interesting one was an atheist funeral at someone's home with a lady who died, did not want anyone to cry, and she loved sherry. So everybody got a glass of sherry and bottles of sherry all over the place. And even myself, I was given this humongous, one of those big wine glasses filled up with sherry. There was a piper. The family was Scottish. There was a piper that was playing bagpipes throughout the service, and his bagpipes playing at the end was complicated. It just, I love that word, complicated. It was a quick cacophony, but anyway, that was interesting. I find that at atheist funerals, they will say you can't use the name of God or Jesus, you can't sing spiritual songs, and you can't read scripture. So I use an old Hebrew poem. There's a time for all things and time to live, no time to die. That's an old Hebrew poem. They don't need to know it. But even at an atheist funeral, there is conversations that happen about death and about life after death and about God. So that's important. And I think if you're attending a funeral, either or any kind of funeral, it's important to have those conversations with people, not for an objective of evangelism, no, simply to care. That little act of witness goes a long way. Vera.
Just like what was being said about the idea of a living funeral, I think one of the important things is probably to say those things that we would say in a eulogy to our parents while they are alive.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a formal kind of ceremony,
Yeah.
but I think that is such a good conversation to still have.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's why the focus on communicating, conversation, community. That's what we're in. One of the most challenging things is actually the opposite to that, is of a living funeral. If your loved one does not want a service at all, I don't want a memorial service, I don't want a funeral, I don't want anything. What do you do?
Yeah.
But you might need the closure. It might be important for you, but they've said no. So what I find works well there is just to sit around a table, have a meal, and share memories and talk about the person. That's a service. It's just not called a service.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm sorry it's late. Just a question. Some elderly people express a desire to live with family, in their older age, and some say they don't want to. Do you have any comments on that? If that's expressed by a person, do you find that they die better in one of the two situations? Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, that's a very complex question. It depends on the family and it depends on the relative. Very much so. Is the family able to care for that person at home? Do they have space? Do they have the financial ability to do that? Is it possible for them? Do they have time? Does the person have medical needs? In the arena of dementia care, the person with dementia will always want to stay at home, will never want to go into a facility, ever. But they can't, because if your mom or dad, and you're going to feel the pressure to take care of them at home, but with dementia, you just can't. You're not trained. You don't have the energy to be with them 24 hours a day, and that's what they're going to need, is 24 hours a day care. So it depends on the person. It depends on their health. It depends on their cognition. There are activities of daily life and indicators of activities of daily life. These are two forms that will be filled out if you go to a home. And they analyze, these two forms will analyze, how is the person able to take care of themselves? Are they able to bath themselves? Are they able to feed themselves? Can they use a telephone? Can they use a bank card? And it's like pages of these questions. And where if these are completed, and usually it'll be a social worker that completes these forms, can they live by themselves in independent living? Do they need mid-care? Do they need frail care? These are very important questions to ask. You can't, it's not simply enough to say, it's my mom, it's my dad. Yes, of course they can come and live with me. You need to think ahead. What do they need? And sometimes, and this is very hard, sometimes what's best for the person emotionally and what's best for the person physically are not the same thing. I wish they were.
What about hospice?
Hospice? Hospice is very focused on end of life. And I believe they will only accept someone if there's, they're pretty sure the person will have about 2 weeks left. That's, I beg your pardon?
A lot of closed down, you know, accepting people to stay for long periods of time.
Yeah. So they used to take people for longer for palliative care, but these days, very short time. I don't know exactly the amount of time it is. I seem to think it's about 2 weeks. But yeah, they're very good in that space. But you know,
But you also get option, I think, where you hospice send someone once a day.
yes.
So they stay at home, but they come also to administer
Yes, that's all
medication.
district, yeah,
Well, that's
yeah.
also useful, yeah.
Well, I like the case with this this lady in our church who's where the palliative nurse came to the home. Yeah,